Now let's take a look at sculpting using textures. So back in Blender, this is 10 begin. Let's say we want to use some sort of an image to sculpt on this rather than just the basic end of our stroke. So if we go into texture, you can see this is where we can start to put in a texture. But to create the texture, we're going to come over here to the right hand side and we're going to come over to texture. And you can see right now it's set to brush, and so we're going to create new. And then under the type, we'll be able to select what kind of texture we want to use. For this initial example, let's just select wood. So we get the preview here of the angled lines. Now there are parameters in here that you can come in and modify, but I'm just going to leave these as is, and then you can modify those if you want. But the key is when we come in here now, we've got this texture selected, and I've just got the Sculpt Draw tool selected. So let me come down here. You can see now as I change the brush size, you can see that preview of what that's going to do and the end of that stroke. So if I were to come in here and let's say stroke this way, you can see it creates those lines based on that texture. But if I stroke this way, it takes those lines and it scrapes them across the surface. So what you end up getting is kind of a blurred line there. Okay, so right now the angle of this texture is being driven by this angle here. It's set to user, and then we can come in and modify this. So now it's going this direction. If we want this to follow along with our brush, we can change this angle from user to rake. So now it flows this way, but then as we turn the brush, it turns to flow the other direction. Now you still don't get the exact effect that you want, but at least it's not skewing all the way across. Okay. You can also set it to random, or it'll just kind of randomly rotate around, which can give you some kind of cool effects. Now the way that this is being mapped on, right now we're using the view plane, but there are all these other kinds of mappings that we can do. So we can use this as a stencil. So you can see we bring it up as a stencil. We can use the right mouse button to move this around, and then shift right mouse button to scale it up and down, control right mouse button to rotate. And so we can move this over on top of an area of our model, and then as we sculpt, it's sculpting through that particular area. Okay, we can rotate around and put this in different spots. So that's the stencil mapping. We can also use a tiled approach, which you can see it's sort of creating a tiled pattern across the surface. And let me take this brush size down. And with that tiled approach, you can see we get some nice clean lines coming across there. Okay, so let's say that we want to create more of kind of an overall noisy pattern. Let's change this type for our texture. And let's just go ahead and maybe choose something like noise. We can also choose maybe like distorted noise, which can give us a really cool kind of an effect. And so we can come in here. You can also use control to kind of push into the surface instead. You've got a scale, so size, you can make that a little bit smaller if you wanted to. You can change the distortion. Maybe come in here, and smooth it back out. And we're using, again, a tiling sort of method. Again, kind of smoothing it back out. We'll just add a little bit of detail that way. So you can see that this would be much harder to get if you weren't using your images, if you're just doing this by hand, having to go in and draw all of that. So kind of using these procedural images. And if you have a map that you've created, you can load that in as well. You just need to choose image or movie in there in order to add it in. Now we can also come in and add just kind of an overall bumpiness. So get maybe noise. And let's actually come in here. And there's different kinds of noise that we can create with this distorted noise. So you can come in and select, some of these other types of noise. That could be kind of cool. And so what we can do is, instead of choosing tile, we can choose 3D. Think of this as sort of, this model exists inside of a block of this material, and we're just revealing whatever is on that, whatever the surface happens to be touching there. So let's take this brush size up a little bit. And let's take our strength down a little. We can come in and add some detail across the surface. Now we're getting a little bit too much there in terms of like the tiling, I think. So I want to come in and change this maybe back to more of a traditional kind of noise. So let's change this back to noise, or we could also do like clouds. So if we just do regular sort of noise, we can come in here and we can start to get some really fine detail in here. We're just using the, again, the 3D projection here, so you can start to see that happening across the surface. The strength isn't too high here. And so we're able to add this sort of bumpiness, general bumpiness on the skin. If we want to make it a little bit more intense, we could do that. Give ourselves a little bit more in terms of bumpiness. And instead of doing bumps, I'm going to come in here and do some of those. Instead of doing bumps, if you wanted to do pores, you would just hit Control, and that would push them into the surface. So if you wanted to do like more like pores, then you can do it that way. Add some detail back here. Maybe raise this detail up a little bit more. So again, that's going to be located in our texture, the texture area of our tools. And then you want to actually create the texture over here. And you can have multiple textures if you want to be able to use multiple ones. You can come in and be able to select those. You can see the one that we created before this is still in there. We can toggle back and forth between those. So just have a little fun adding some kind of high resolution skin sort of bumpiness to your model using the textures that you can create inside of Blender. All right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is some of the other settings that we can use with our brush appearance and how the brush strokes are applied. And then we'll take a look at using dynamic topology in sculpting. So we'll go ahead and do that next.